All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. If you're a regular listener to the show, you probably have noticed that I like to talk to jazz players as much as I can. I mean, the show obviously talks to people of all different genres of music, from death metal to experimental video game music to country to whatever. But I like listening to jazz, and it's always been one of those genres that I feel like I don't understand enough. I know what I like about it, but I'm always kind of very curious to hear from people who understand it, maybe at a different level than I do, or a different sort of appreciation for it. So whenever an opportunity arises to talk to someone who is involved in that field, I always jump at it. And another thing that I do every summer is I don't get out to shows much. I prefer to stay at home, especially in the winters in Winnipeg. I mean, people know what that's like. But in the summers, I basically scour the internet to find every outdoor festival or show or porch concert or whatever I can find, especially ones that are free and outdoors. I can take my kids to whatever. So one of the things I look up every year is what's happening at the Pride Festival, the Forks. And so the guest on this episode is someone whose name was on the bill, and you definitely seem like you're playing a different style of music than I've ever seen on one of the lineups for Pride before. So I figured, well, this is a great time to reach out and have you on the podcast. So I think the best way to start this whole thing out is if you want to introduce yourself and just give a bit of background about what you do as an artist.
Yeah, sure. Oh yeah. Ooh. So my name's Sean Irvine, and I'm I guess what would be best labeled as a woodwind specialist. I think that's the term we're going with these days. So I play clarinet, flute, oboe, and saxophone. Um, and there's kind of two phases to it. So there's I guess that term, the artist side, which I fit somewhere in the categories of contemporary instrumental. I do write for lyrics as well. So, somewhere on the contemporary side of jazz, and then studio and sessional, where I'm kind of one of those people that people are like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z in a recording. I'm like, oh, I can do that. So I go in and then we record, or we, live performances where it's, there's an element of just, instead of having like an instrumental section, they can have a person who doubles on multiple instruments, and they're able to kind of acquire those different sounds and colors that they might want for that experience. So that's kind of what I do.
Well, and looking at your various bios online and social media and things, you have a pretty good resume of just a wide range of people you've worked with over the years too, right? So that definitely kind of illustrates what you're saying is just the ability to sort of fit in with what people need for woodwind instruments and just add that color and those sounds to whatever kind of music it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's how do I put it? I think this is what I love about what I do is that it's like every day is different in the office, so to say, right? I get the glory of getting to meet so many different musicians, and as a result of that, so many different crowds of people, um, who like I've done the jazz shows, obviously, but I've also been on pop, rock, folk, contemporary. I've been asked to do a death metal bass clarinet thing, but it didn't work out. So, but that's cool. Like I love that. Like, I remember one of the coolest gigs I think I've ever played was I got hired to play in a yoga studio where they had like electronics and a series of like different woodwind instruments, and we had to create like an ambiance thing. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Why not? Right. So that's the beauty of, I think, the sessional side of it is you get to see so many different worlds, and it keeps it interesting.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. Yeah, I actually interviewed a guy who does electronic music for yoga classes like all the time, and it's a totally other audience of music than you think about, right? I mean, there's so many different ways people can appreciate music, and that's just a very specific one. But it's a thing. There's a market for it and an audience for it.
Totally. I mean, it's, what is it? It's like you can be creative with music, but then the functionality of music is a whole other side of creativity that the more you explore it, kind of the cooler the experience is, right? So, again, like there may be the yoga experience, but I had another one where it was just like a single light bulb in the middle of the room and people laying on the floor around this. And it was just musicians kind of all boxed around. And it was like, there was no instruction. It was just like a free improvising thing, and everyone had an instrument, and you just kind of, it was a conversation that everyone was kind of surrounded in. So sometimes it's like people don't even know what they're really signing up for, but those can be some of the coolest experiences, right? So
Totally.
yeah, I don't know. I digress.
Well, I guess maybe a interesting question then would be, what is your background as far as music that you listen to? Like, I mean, not that there's anything wrong with the oboe, for example, but it doesn't seem like the kind of instrument maybe a teenage kid's gonna gravitate towards, right? What were you into sort of before you got into these woodwind instruments?
Oh man. I mean, so I have a brother who's also he's what's called a psycho death rockabilly musician. Still unpacking what that is, but I've heard it. So so I growing up, I was a lot of secondhand to what my brother was listening to, which was not jazz.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, so I grew up like my favorite band growing up was No Doubt, which kind of got me into like they were right on that teetering edge on a couple points of almost ska, like they were getting into that world. And then with my brother, I did get into the ska a little bit. So Streetlight Manifesto was a big one for me. So, I think I started to experience a little bit of instrumental that way. And then just, you go through like the band gambit of school. I remember seeing a festival, there was a guy playing saxophone. I thought it was going to be a cardiothoracic surgeon for a living. And then I heard this guy play and I was like, oh, well, guess I'm not going to med school because I got to do that for the rest of my life. And very fortunately, I got to study with him at Brandon for 6 years, Brandon University. So, it's funny that I think I've talked to so many people about this, about how they kind of get into music or where their interest lies in music. And some people I've talked to are like, I just could hear these arrangements or these orchestrations in my head. And I'm like, wow, you should really do something with that because that's not normal. But, for me, I think I heard something so beautiful. I feel like it's like what someone sees this beautiful sight when they go to Italy or, they go to France and they see this and they're inspired to travel as a result of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I finally heard that in a sound and it completely changed me. And then, of course, once you're part of a community, that community starts to introduce you to other things, right? So if you're part of a death metal community and you go to a death metal concert, they're going to be talking about like, oh, this concert, this concert, this concert. So when you're part of a jazz community, so say, they start talking about this artist and this artist and this artist. So, maybe that's a bit of a lengthy answer.
No, it's a good answer actually, and it's interesting that you mentioned ska too. I was in a ska band in the late '90s, and like right when the third wave was kind of happening, and it was a big genre for like a week and a half. But that was definitely an in for a lot of people who were interested in playing saxophone or trumpet or trombone. I mean, I played guitar poorly, but we had a lot of kids who were incredible musicians who were in our band as teenagers, and because we didn't know how, all the punk type kids didn't know how to play a sax or a trumpet or whatever. So it'd be like, oh, let's go to the band kids. And they all have this. And it was like an opportunity for all the band kids, I think, to get into playing like DIY shows.
Yeah.
Which maybe wasn't there before because, there weren't like jazz shows happening at the Royal Albert or whatever. There are now.
Right. No, totally. I feel like ska was like the introduction of the re-rise of the band nerds. Like the band nerds like finally found their way into the world and were like, yes, this was our moment. So, and there is a power to having a horn section, in terms of like we think about composition and dynamic and sound and like how far the sound can go. I mean, let's be honest here, as soon as a guitar comes into the mix, dynamically we've just gone from here to here. But I think there's some kind of power of having a horn section or a vocalist section. Having 4 vocalists versus 1 is like, wow, okay, now we're cooking with gas. So
yeah.
I think the ska world was a really interesting chapter, and I'm waiting for the resurgence.
It's happening. There is a resurgence. It's already started to happen.
Yes, I got to go to more shows then.
Yeah, you do. You definitely do. Well, maybe there's another side of what you do too, right? Which is the educational side. How long have you been teaching music?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna age myself here. Long. What now? 15 years roughly? I think I did my first clinic when I was 18 years old, and admittedly, I had no freaking idea what I was doing. But it's like fake it till you make it. You just have to be one lesson. I've taught now. I would say it's the better part of my career. I'm very fortunate to play music and I enjoy it, but I think a lot of what I do is teaching. So I got into clinic work teaching, and then from there, I was the director of woodwinds for an outreach organization with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra called El Sistema. And, because I was a woodwind doubler, they were like, well, we want you to teach flutes and clarinets, and we want to introduce oboe. I said, okay, great. So I'd done the programming for that. And in its first years of running, I really enjoyed it. And then other opportunities kind of came up where I was doing kind of like assisting educators with jazz in schools, and thorough enjoyment into that, and then eventually starting to teach in university. And then When COVID hit, and I started seeing all the shows kind of disappearing, I was like, all right, well, I guess it's time to go get my doctorate, So I went to school out in Toronto for the last 3 years, working on the coursework with that. And then I started teaching at University of Toronto. I was teaching jazz pedagogy and running some ensembles and
Oh, cool.
co-teaching a jazz orchestration and arranging course. So, it's so funny because I always said, like, I think I really was pushing in my performance career, but the road just slowly kind of pushed me in this teaching and composition world that, I don't mind. And I'm very thankful. I've met some really incredible students. I really took joy in exceptional learning. So I myself have a disability called dyscalculia. So
Okay.
I struggle with numbers and permutations. And it was a big part of my struggle with learning with jazz. I really had troubles making sense of the theory. And, as I became more vocal about this and I had figured out what the shadow was named, I started having teachers coming with students who were exceptional learning. And I really developed a love and passion for that. So I've had students who've come to me who had one in particular I'm thinking of had genetic displacement where he had no teeth in his mouth. So
Okay.
playing saxophone, we had to like all the mechanics about anchoring your teeth and the way that you structure your embouchure. We'd kind of go around and relearn that. I've dealt with students with disabilities with dyslexia where the note reading is a challenge, or so I love the process of kind of just working through things slowly with the student one-on-one, and that's been really exceptional. So yeah, I love teaching. I feel very blessed to be able to do it.
Well, and I guess if you're dealing with, I mean, this probably applies to yourself as well. But if you're dealing with people who have that extra level of challenge, they obviously really want it, right? I mean, if you're going to the point of not just learning an instrument and learning the theory and all that, which is difficult for anyone, but then having this extra barrier and working to get over it, you got to be super passionate about the instrument and the sound and the music.
I think they find a home in it. I think sometimes the world can be a little bit tough with those with maybe extra needs or exceptional learning, but they can see that they can really thrive and flourish in music.
Yeah.
I had this great instructor, one of the greatest Canadian composers, actually, I would say at this point, David Braid. And I remember talking to him about this in one of my first lessons with him. I said, this is something we have to navigate as I have dyscalculia. And he said, in a world where in artistry, we search for individuality and we search for exceptional learning and thinking outside the box, why should this not be something that we value so highly? And that's always stuck with me. Like, I think this thing that I always looked at as something that was holding me back, that was a really brilliant moment where I was like, oh, maybe I can do something special with this then. And I think anytime I've encountered one of those students, they never learned the way that the textbook says. And I love that about it. So I think in those lessons, more often than not, I say, right now I don't have the answer right away, but if you give me the week, I will figure it out. And that it's made me a better player. I think as an instrumentalist, it's made me a better educator and a composer too, in thinking about the way that music is constructed. So I'm very thankful for it.
That's very cool. It's interesting because you're gonna end up with unique sounds from people like that too, right? Because they're approaching things so differently out of necessity, but that's gonna result hopefully in something that no one's tried before because you need to do that to get what you get where you want. So yeah, I think in any field that kind of taking a different approach is usually going to end up with something really cool.
Yeah, I agree with you. I appreciate that thought and that sentiment. I couldn't agree more. So yeah, I think and I think I'm sure you've had this experience being a musician too, when there's always that individual that shows up to a rehearsal that you've never worked with before, and then you're like, oh, I really dig how this person is thinking or what they're doing or putting out. And then you're inspired to want to work with them more, right? And you start to collaborate, and suddenly the way that you think about music or write music is influenced by that individual. And there's kind of this like other level of music that you're creating because that person is inspiring your music and taking it to places that you would never have thought of. And likewise in the reverse,
For sure.
So I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So you're back in Winnipeg now?
Yes, I am, as of 3 days ago.
Okay, it's pretty
Yeah.
recent. Yeah.
It happened very quickly. So and I'm so happy. I'm so happy. Don't get me wrong, Toronto was fantastic, and it was really good for me. There was a lot of things that I learned. I met a lot of really beautiful people with really big hearts. Um, gosh, I like Winnipeg is special. I gotta say this, like I know some like unfortunately some reactions were like, oh, what happened? Why are you going there? And I'm like, no, 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 it's good, it's great. Um, I've missed this music community. I've missed I've missed how quiet it is here. You don't realize until you've come back to something like how unique it is,
Yeah.
and like the silence, the like birds calling. you know I haven't heard of a fire truck yet all day, and I'm a little weirded out about it. So
It's only been 3 days. You'll hear it soon.
they're all waiting around the corner. It's only a matter of minutes.
Yeah, yeah,
Ambushing me. Yeah. So, like Toronto was really cool. And what's really awesome about the scene is there's so many musicians there, right? So you can kind of find anyone that's into a flavor of some sort, and you'll have a band that you collaborate with. I'll get calls sometimes about people looking for specific musicians. I had a film composer reach out, and he was like, I'm looking for a traditional Greek instrumentalist, like the real deal, like for a movie soundtrack. Like, is there any way someone? I was like, I don't know off the top of my head. Let me reach out. And I sent out a message to contacts, and I got like this person. Everyone had someone. So, like it's really cool because these people exist in Toronto. It's a landing pad in Canada. It was just, I think this statistic's about 6 months old, but Toronto is now approximately, I think it was 52% people who were not born in Canada, and then 48% born in Canada.
yeah. That's really cool. That's a really cool stunt.
It's really awesome. So, and again, all these kind of traditional instrumentalists and like folk musicians are these people that are landing there. So it's really brilliant because you can kind of see any type of show and like authentic folk music, and it's like, it's there. You have to like take a subway train. You have to pay $10, and it's going to be like one of the coolest nights that you didn't expect. So
Yeah, that's a good thing to have just like down the street from you is getting
yeah,
access to that for sure. So you're just back in Winnipeg. You already have shows happening. Obviously, you're playing next weekend at, well, from when we're recording this, at the Pride Festival, the Forks. How did you get that? Because jazz is not something that I don't think I've ever seen on the lineups that they put out every year for that festival. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I just missed it. But
oh, that's great. Like I know I'm actually playing a show tomorrow night at the Human Rights Museum with Zach Rushings, whose alter ego Lady Muse,
okay,
being an amazing singer, like amazing vocalist, and arranger for that fact. And it's for the opening of Pride. They're at the Human Rights Museum. There's a show. It's free to attend, but they've got limited capacity. So I know they've already pre-sold 250 tickets for this. But
wow.
um,
Well, by the time this comes out, it'll already be over anyway, that show. But
yeah, it's too bad.
yeah.
Sorry, my screen's a little blurry here. So like that's going on. But then I got the phone call from one of the artistic directors, and they reached out and were saying, I went to university with them, and they said, you're coming back. We'd love to have you. We know like you've written a lot of music that's queer centric, and my first album was a series of gay men's stories that were adapted for instrumental
Okay.
music. And we were very fortunate. We got a lot of support from the different arts councils in Canada, and it wouldn't have happened without them. But so, I my first album ever was based around kind of this gay men's stories idea. And then when they approached, they said, we'd be interested in having you. Like, would you want to put together a 45-minute set for this? And I said, yeah, oh my gosh, totally. So, I'm actually working with Lady Muse on this show as well. They're going to be singing, and I approached them, was like, like if we're going to do some vocal stuff, is there some stuff that you think might be cool? And we got into kind of some of the queer centric composers of jazz.
Okay.
One of which my favorite is Cole Porter. So Cole Porter was like a huge musical and like show music. A lot of the pop music of kind of like the swing era and the like going into the 40s. And Cole Porter wrote these tunes that I just don't know if everyone, like if you put the glasses on of like there's a gay man behind this music, you start to realize that, like, you know, like one of the tunes we're doing is "You're the Top," and you know, like, you're the top, I'm the bottom. You know, like this kind of thing starts to come out, and like when you start to think about it from like a queer lens, you're just like, oh, okay, you know. So we're doing some Cole Porter music. You know, I wanted to include female composers, so we got some of that going on, and then some of the music I wrote will also be in there as well in our set. So I'm very excited. I think it's gonna be a really fun concert, and as you said, the outdoor concert thing, like let's soak up the sun, let's do it. So I'm really excited to do that at 12:30 on the Sunday there. And of course I'm playing with some really beautiful musicians who I'm just always so excited to get the chance to make music with. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's very cool. So if people are hearing about you for the first time on this show, what's the best way to find what you're up to? I mean, you know, the good thing about this being a podcast is it's being recorded now. By the time it comes out, that show will be imminent. But someone could hear this a year from now, 2 years from now. I mean, I've been doing this show for a decade now, and so these episodes are still kind of floating around in the ether forever. So, what's the best way to find your music and find out what you're up to as far as potential upcoming shows or upcoming recordings, things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So the big one, Instagram. I put everything on Instagram. I try to advertise things about a week before, and then a couple days before, and then usually the day of. So my handle is at Sean.Irvine. Sean spelled the right way. SEAN.IRVINE. So they can find me there. I also have a website, www.seanirvinewoodwinds.com. And I'm currently working on the calendar, but I'm going to have that up in the next couple of days because I got to do that. So those are probably the best two ways to go about it. I am on Facebook too, but yeah, I think that should get you to the finish line.
And as far as finding your music, is it all, like, does the website have all the links and everything you need to find it there?
You bet. Yeah, I'm on Bandcamp. You can find me on what are we doing? iTunes. I'm on Shazam. What's the other one I'm blanking on right now? Oh no. It's the big one that
Spotify?
right? Yeah, that's it. Spotify.
I don't use any of them, so except for Bandcamp, I use Bandcamp. But everything else I do is physical music only. So I'm so like I'm too stubborn to set in my ways to move forward into this dystopian future. So yeah, usually people just say it's on all of them, and I say, okay, cool. It's good to me.
And I've when I printed my first CD, I printed way too many copies.
I think everyone has done that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've like joked that like the packing peanuts to my grave is going to be these CDs. So I usually hold them up at the show and say, I don't know if anyone still has a CD player, but if you do, these are available, you know? So there's something just magical about a physical copy.
Oh yeah.
Sure. I hold it too. So if I go to shows I really love, I still buy CDs. And I've got like a Walkman. I don't know if most people know what that is anymore, but I still have a Walkman. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good. So people can get I assume if there are people like, you know, as stubborn as me out there who want physical media, can they buy the CDs off your website or at shows?
Yeah, yeah. Bandcamp, they'll find the link on my website there. So I'm happy to send a CD their way. Perfect. For sure. We'll sell them at concerts, and CDs are available.
Awesome.